Hey everybody, it's Deborah Henderson. Good to see you. This is going to be my testimony. I had a dream last night that I was all up in the 80s and I had my hair all funky like I used to blow dry it up and blow dry it up. Remember that working woman's look? Remember with that tranny Melanie Griffith? Oh my goodness, they're all trannies, people. Back in the days of Rome, women were not allowed to be actresses. They were all men, and nothing has changed. There's nothing new under the sun. So anyways, I had this weird dream about, being back in the 80s, so I decided I would do and go with an 80s theme since I woke up and my husband's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Oh, it was my hair. I had a dream about my hair." So anyways, I'm going to start by whipping out my can of King James like I always do. And we're going to turn to Jeremiah 33:3. Ooh, 33:3. Think about those numbers. Okay, you got 33 and then you got 3, which could be 9. Those are, God originated. He is the master mathematician. He originated numerology, and the devil came in and took it over and turned it upside down. So there's really the occult. They're just a bunch of copycats. They just turn everything backwards and inside out, like Anton LaVey, in the Satanic Bible, clearly says you have to do everything backwards. Hello. So God has everything forwards, and he's revealing his mysteries. So let me go ahead and get started. I didn't wear these in the 80s. Okay, we'll start with verse 1, Jeremiah 33:3. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah the second time, while he was yet shut up in the court of the prison, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the maker thereof, the Lord that formed it, to establish it, the Lord is his name. Verse 3. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things that thou knowest not. Now, when I first read that verse, when I first got saved, I called upon him, and the first thing I asked him, I said, if you're real, give me full disclosure. Be careful what you ask for. So I'm going to start in the 90s, in the early 90s, when I really started seeking. You see, I grew up Catholic. My abuelita de Mexicali, yo soy media mexicana, half Mexican. So when I was born, my mother and my daddy from Alabama, so my husband calls me a redneck, Alabama redneck Mexican wildcat. So when I was born, they dumped me off in Mexicali, and I didn't come back to the States until I was close to 5 years old. So Spanish was my first language. But it was peasant Spanish because my abuelita estaba muy pobre. She was very, very poor. Dirt floors. I still remember bathing in those aluminum tins, those big aluminum tins that they make masa out of and everything. I remember dirt floors and bathing in aluminum tins. So my grandmother, of course, was Catholic. My mother wasn't anything. She was just a floater. She knew there was something wrong with the Catholic Church. At 5 years old, we moved into an upper middle class neighborhood in Downey, California. And, we lived on a cul-de-sac. So I had just, regular white girl upbringing with my Barbie dolls and hide and seek, capture the flag. On the cul-de-sac, we had our block parties. It was a really nice childhood. We really did have a blessed childhood. Um, I got in trouble one time for running a los jacales. I was going all up in los jacales at 5 years old. I was running to my little girlfriend's house so I could play Barbies. And my grandmother drug me home from across the street and made me bow down before Mary and told me to pray to Mary for forgiveness. And I was like, why? I'm not going to, I was a rebel back then at 5 years old, okay? So I'm like, why am I going to pray to this statue? No. I said, no, this is wrong. And my mother came in at this time and chastised my grandmother and said, don't you ever do this to my daughter. Your religion is your religion. Do not force this upon my children. They will not be, Catholic. But she switched, wish-wash throughout my childhood. We would go to the Catholic church with my grandmother, da-da-da, whatever. That's over with. Let's jump up to the late 80s, when I really started getting into the beach scene down in Hermosa. I started roller skating and attempted surfing, but roller skating was my thing. I was always the one in the bikini and the roller skate on the strand and just having a time. And, this is before all the yuppies took over, like when all of the native Hermosians were there. And it was a time. It was a good, the 80s was just so much fun, wasn't it? Don't you remember the 80s, y'all? It was just so much fun. And then the 90s came around and I started seeking my spirituality. I found out that I'm part Choctaw and part Cherokee, and this is when the whole Native American culture exploded. You had, the Pocahontas came out. You had on the History Channel what was it called? How the West was lost. Talking about how the Indians lost the West and all the breach of treaties and the conspiracies of the government, which are not theories. I dare you to go to any Native American on his reservation and call any of those conspiracies a theory, okay? Oh, wake up, people, wake up! Don't you see what's happening? My goodness, it's been in motion for millennium, since the days of Nimrod, okay? And now, cause and effect. We've reached the end game. We are in the end game. So I started seeking, and I went to junior college, and I started studying and practicing yoga. And I became all a part of that New Age movement. And this was back in 1991, 1992, before anybody even knew what yoga was. I started doing the echinacea and the golden seal and all kinds of herbs in liquid form. I started doing that. And then I moved. So, I started seeking whatever. I went to the Calvary Chapel in West Covina where Raw Reese was preaching, and the hypocrisy in that Christian church turned me away from Christianity for 2 decades, maybe 3. How old am I? 48? For 30 years? I don't know. 2 decades. We don't need to calculate it. We'll just talk about it. So they were reading out of the New King James Bible, and the New King James Bible, when you open it, they have a triquetra right here. And I would ask, what is this symbol? What is it? This is before I knew it was a triquetra. And they said, well, no, that just represents the Trinity. Don't worry about it. It's the New King James Bible. You can understand it. I said, well, what's the King James Bible? You don't want to read that. That's archaic. It has all kinds of these and thous in it. You're not going to be able to understand the King James Bible, girl. You just stick with the New King James Bible, okay? You hear? Just stick with the New King James Bible and you'll be all right. So I ran right on over to the bookstore and bought myself a $50 New King James Bible. And I was, oh, look, I got my New King James Bible. Now I fit in. Now I fit in. Now I'm part of the clique. And then we would go on retreats over to Ensenada and Mexico and Rosarita and help with the orphanages. But it was really bizarre because it was like a mini vacation for these people. It's like they didn't feel like missionaries or evangelists. It just felt like it was a cheap mini vacation for them. And I just got turned off by the whole Christian scene. So I ended up moving to Ontario, which was less than an hour from Hollywood, probably about 35 to 45 minutes. This is way before the traffic got as bad as it is. Remember, this is the early 90s. So I started hanging out with a lot of rock stars before they were rock stars. Remember, this is when Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and Poison, the hair metal bands, started coming to the scene and just partying on the Sunset Strip. And it was a time. We had a time. I'll tell you that. It was fun. One of my girlfriends is in the Judas Priest video. She's no longer my, whatever. But it was a time. And so I was living as a heathen. I was heathenistic. I was done with God. I was done with Christianity. The Catholic Church was messed up. The Christian Church was messed up. We were forced to go to church growing up. We tried so many different churches, and my parents never stuck to anything. I don't even think they go to church now. I believe my mother's an atheist. She believes that we came from monkeys. She believes that my great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy is a monkey. Really? Okay, so whatever, you can't choose your parents, right? So from there, I went to junior college. I started studying yoga, practicing yoga, started studying Buddhism, Hinduism, all the mystic religions, and I can't even remember all the names of it. You know, Pastor Perfect has it down. Ask him, he'll tell you. The Gambachia or something like that. I don't remember what they're called. And I started just delving into it. And then I found out through a cousin of mine in the South that we're part Choctaw and part Cherokee. So then I just fell into the whole Native American culture and started associating with, solid Native Americans. And I would go to their powwows, and outside of Palm Springs, I would go and do sweat lodges with, solid Native Americans. And it was so, I would go to the reservation right outside of Palm Springs, Palm Desert in California. And it was so disheartening because the poverty and the alcoholism that you saw on these reservations. I mean, you want to talk about poverty. These Native Americans were poor, poor. I mean, they barely had any food. They had no closed cupboards. They were just like shelves in their kitchen, like those cheap plastic shelves. And the only thing they would have would be like a bag of white rice and a bag of beans, and then just a few condiments and stuff like that. It was really disheartening, and the places were small and dirty, and the alcoholism was just rampant, rampant. So, I started kind of opening my eyes to like, wait a second, these people aren't prospering, yet they claim to be spiritual, and so I'm starting to add all this stuff together and listening to the elders and how the government just completely betrayed them and the conspiracies and how they killed them off. It was really disheartening and sad. It was really sad. So I had to get out of there because I didn't want to be sad, So I kind of just let go of my Indian heritage, and that chapter of my life was over. I started just really getting into New Age. New Age, because it rhymes with sewage. I really started getting into the New Age movement, and with both feet. And my stones, my energy stones, my chakra, my, studying. I would teach to my friends yoga. I mean, I was teaching yoga before people even knew what yoga was. This is in the early 90s. Only a handful of people actually knew or cared about what it was, so which really amazes me how it is just blowing up, and Kundalini Yoga has just infested God's house. Well, after that, the whole New Age experience, I went to Atlanta in about 96 or 97, right after the Olympics, after they built, let me pause this because a truck is coming by.